Hi, Ann and Jeremy. Here's a tutorial on how to do some color correction. Just thought I'd put it all in a video. That way you can always go back and refer to it on your own time and whenever you need to. Anyway, so here's one of your images opened up in Photoshop. Um, and, obviously it looks good, but we can do a lot of things to this to make it look subjectively better. Now, this is entirely up to you what that means, but just thought I'd go through some of the things that we can do. Anyway, one of the first things we want to look at is the overall tonal range of the picture, just to see where it's at from the point of view of what's there. As you know, a digital image is made of pixels. That squared thing there is a pixel. So we can see what we're editing. We're actually editing these pixels. So each of these pixels has a color value. And the color space we're in is CMYK, because that's how it's going to be printed, I believe, CMYK. If that's not true, then we would be in RGB, red, green, blue. CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, black. Just so you understand what the actual data is from the underlying point of view. Okay, so we've got a picture here, your picture, and let's go take a look at the levels, the overall tonal range of the levels. We make our adjustments up under Image. We can do adjustments, and one of the first places we would go is to Levels. Now this is going to show a histogram of how all of those pixels add up across the color spectrum, from down here in the shadows to up here in the highlights. So we can see most of the pixels are down in the lower end, the lower half of the image. It is kind of a dark image, so that makes sense. Now in CMYK printing, you have what are called gray balance adjustments. That means all of the neutral tones, shadows, mid-tone grays, and highlights, whites, are set via some settings. That's what these three eyedroppers are for: shadows, mid-tones, and highlights. Now this is for color adjustment when you're adjusting, compensating for the printing process. So for example, let's go take a look at what it says highlight here. Double click on the highlight, and over here on the right you'll see that the balance there is default is cyan 3%, magenta 1, yellow 1, no black. That's the default setting, and anybody who is in the printing business would know that's a good highlight value. That's a good way that you'd want your highlight to be. On the other end of the spectrum, the shadow, double click there, we see that a good shadow value is these values of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Those are standard printing settings for highlights, midtone, and shadows. The midtones are a little bit more subjective, and again, you can see up here that's the gray for that. Anyway, so as we look, we see that there isn't necessarily a set distribution of colors, and that doesn't have to be. But let's just go through, use a couple of these tools to see what we would have. If we select the highlight button, and now when we go over to our image and we select a highlight, it's going to apply that setting 311 to this part of the image. If you click on that, you see now this highlight, this whitest portion of the page roughly, and we could have picked any of the other white portions, have now been reset to the color values. If we had our densitometer up, it would show, in fact, up in the upper right hand corner, you can see the densitometer settings, what it used to be and what it is now. When we put it on here, that's the upper right hand corner up there. Anyway, so we've reset the highlight to be that new value. If we do the same thing for the shadow, by clicking on that and then picking a shadow portion, perhaps the darkest point, click on there, and you can see now we've redistributed the tonal range to be darker in the lower end and lighter in the higher end. Now we could also fiddle up here. So in other words, this button sets the shadow. If I move this up this way, you can see things get darker. If I move this one that way, it makes it even lighter. Again, you can adjust those to your heart's content. And this is the mid-tone. You want to open that up or put it down, you can do it. Usually just set it at 1 for now. Anyway, so we've just reset the highlight and the shadow values so it looks a little brighter, a little more contrast, right? The darkers are darker, the lighters are lighter. That already looks a little better, in my opinion. Again, it's subjectively. Now, the next thing you might want to do is enhance the colors, make them look a little richer. The way we do that is under Adjustments. We can use the Hue Saturation value, and now that pulls up this dialog. And I usually only mess with, say, the saturation button here, but look what happens when we pull this up. It's going to make those greens greener. Just kind of all the colors just pop a little bit more. Again, subjectively, that looks a little better to me. And more or less done, except for one final adjustment that you can make. And this is good to do because it helps us make the image sharper, almost like it's more in focus. Let's go in and show you what happens when we add this new adjustment. So this is zoomed in. Now this filter that we use to add this sharpening is under the filter choice up here, and it's under sharpen, and it's a adjustment called Unsharp Masking. This is one of those things that most people don't know about, but it's very common in the high-end scanning and color reproduction world. Now what we do here is we click on that choice, and it gives us an ability to sharpen things up. So we can choose the amount, percentage of we're sharpening. We can choose the radius of the number of pixels around. Basically what sharpening does is it takes the edges and enhances the edges of all parts of the picture. So it's going to create this illusion of things being more in focus. So let me just apply this at these default settings. This is a pretty good value, and say OK. Now just to show you what it was like before, let me do an undo. And you know how to do undo, right? In this case, undo Unsharp Mask. And let's redo that Unsharp Mask. So you can see it just sharpens things up a little. It's kind of a good little thing to know about. And now here's our image, more or less enhanced, and compared to the original, that's where we started, and this was where we ended up. Purely subjective, but entirely up to you to decide what's good and what's not. Anyway, hope that helps and gives you some strategies for moving forward.